each of the CV elements and discuss its rationales or importance and how the information will be used in the scientific evaluation. And this should really help you to draft your CV in the future. The second part will focus on the SNSF portal. There, Claudia will do a live presentation of the online platform and to go step by step through the individual sections and show you the different functionalities and on how to use the platform. And there we can also cover some more technical aspects as to what is needed for a login, how do you add the CV to your application, and other practical aspects. So the goals from our side is that you, after this webinar, that you understand what are the requirements of the CV format and that you will be able to plan the generation or creation of your CV. Second, that we would like to understand you better the reason of the change in the CV format and what we would like to achieve with it. Third point is that we would like to reduce potential technical hurdles, give you support in how to navigate and use the platform. And last but not least, because there's always more questions, where can you find support or help when you really are working on your CV and need to ask somebody something. But we also have a goal for us, and that is to learn from you, the research community or the grant offices, and your questions and feedback will help us to improve our support information and provide better guidance in the future. And as a start, we analyzed quickly yesterday the feedbacks that you provided us during the registration. And without you knowing many details about the new format, we just want to kind of feel a little bit the temperature, what you think of certain CV elements. And we were happy to see that for most elements, there is a certain positive attitude towards them, which gives us confidence that we're making a step in the right direction. And the result actually reflects pretty well what we found already in 2020 with our online survey in the pilot phase. We can also obviously see that there's still a high degree of uncertainty for all the elements, since you do not have the details yet. But as I said before, we hope that we'll be able to give you enough information today and explain you in detail why these elements are interesting or a step into the right direction. We also ask you about benefits and challenges that you see in this new format, and the main themes that emerged concerning benefits was maybe better comparability, fairer evaluation, more ways to include career breaks. And these are actually all reasons why we adapted the CV and the new format to really help to better respect these principles. On the other hand, you also raised maybe doubts or criticism about the format as well. And here, what was obviously mentioned was maybe this space limitation, a focused format, maybe increased time investment to generate a CV. And then also if the format is flexible enough for all different scientists in all different fields. And then also this issue, which we obviously also see as potentially a risk, this overselling and how this the writing style could influence the evaluation outcome. But I think we have really addressed these points during the implementation, and you will see later how we did this and why. Now, to understand better the motivation and reason for why the SNSF was rethinking the CV format, we need to look first what the CV is actually used for and what role it plays into the scientific evaluation. And in practically all of our funding instruments, the CV is an integral part of an application. And in our funding regulations, the SNSF defined two criteria for the award of research grants. And one is that the experts rate the scientific quality of the proposed project, and they also need to evaluate the scientific track record of the researcher. And this is where the CV comes mainly into play. CV, together with other documents in the application, should inform the evaluators about the scientific track record and about the ability to carry out the research that is proposed. And while it has to be said, of course, that the project with all the above-mentioned criteria stands in the center of the evaluation, the CV still has a very important role as well, and is supposed to provide really information concerning two main criteria. Now, obviously, the SNSF already has guidelines for the CV. However, they are published on our website or in PDFs, and applicants did either maybe not find the regulations or did not follow our recommendation. And this leads to CVs which are very heterogeneous and differ in the provided information. So there were all kinds of metrics included. There was personal information about marriage status, children, pictures of applicants, and CVs were in general rather long, which resulted in evaluators maybe cherry picking what they were using for the evaluation. And then also our evaluators had to navigate through many different styles of CVs. And even if the same information is there in 2 CVs, it might not always be obvious to find it. And besides this high degree of heterogeneity, there was also frequently information which was not DORA compatible. And since the SNSF signed the DORA declaration, this was obviously not very satisfying for us. And so to remedy the situation and to find a CV format which englobes the most important information of a researcher's career in a concise way and provides the same level of information for all applicants, we started to think about how we could introduce a new format that would allow us to do that. And so as a start, we launched a pilot project in 2020 where we tested several CV elements in a rather small funding, in one funding instrument, and we used these results to base our reflections now on these results for the new format. And we have the results of this pilot. We had close interactions with our research council members and obviously also input from the office with the aim to achieve a concordant concept which addresses the suggestions from the research council and the applicants, which includes the positively evaluated elements from the pilot project, and which also builds on what we actually are currently using, because not everything is bad, obviously, that we use now. So we try to also use the strength of our current system. And so what we end up with is maybe not so much a new format, but rather a streamlined and condensed format. So here you can see we have many, currently we ask for many elements, we have also major achievements, and we have this output list. And now what we have in the future is one document, which is shorter and more focused. It focuses on the important achievements that are selected and described by applicants. This can range from publications to grants to networks and so forth, but it's always accompanied with narratives which give evaluators context and a quick overview about the achievement. And in addition, there is this ORCID link to the profile where evaluators can see additional works if needed. So how does this format look like? Here is a sample CV which uses more or less the available space that the researchers have in the future. And so depending on the length of the education and employment history, the CV will now encompass about 3 to 4 pages. And all applicants will have the same structure and the same outline. And this will bring transparency and clarity into the scientific evaluation. And this will also help our panel members who will navigate through many different CVs to do their comparative evaluations. And so also due to this condensed format, evaluators will be able to spend more time to actually assess the content and explanation of the researchers compared to the current format, which easily makes up 10 pages or more, where publication lists naturally become more enticing to look at. Let's have a quick walk through the different elements in order to see what our panel members would actually look at and assess. So first, they will see basic information about the applicant here on the left side. This starts with their actual position and what their net academic age is. So this will help the evaluators to put in context the achievements of the applicant's work based on the career stage and the academic age. This is followed by a short overview on the educational and scientific training, which reflects the scientific qualification of the applicant. And then actually follows the core element of the CV, which is the combination of these narrative elements with the selected works that are cited in combination with them. And so in the narratives, researchers really can explain their contributions to science or to society, but at the same time, they have to provide supporting evidence and giving the evaluators the chance to consult their work if they need. So the evaluator can immediately see here, source 3 cited. He can look immediately below and evaluate this work in more detail if needed. And so this is an important interplay between narratives and works, which should help on one hand to give researchers the opportunity to explain their contributions and role in this work, but at the same time restrict too much overselling and non-substantiated claims. The last element is the ORCID identifier at the bottom of each page. You can see that here, check. And there, this is an active link going to the ORCID profile of the applicant. And this is giving evaluators the option to consult additional works if the content of the CV, the research plan, and other documents is not sufficient to evaluate the scientific qualification of the researcher. Now, to generate a CV, you will have to log into the SNSF portal. We did this in order to guide applicants in a structured way through this procedure. It's the same CV template for all our funding instruments. And this is obviously important so that you can reuse the CV for further applications. We'll see that later on how that works. And at the moment, how do you submit the CV? If you submit still on MySNF, our current proposal management system, you have to still submit it as a PDF. And in the future, once the SNSF portal is maybe also handling applications, it is obviously integrated in there as well. Yes, that is so much to the point. Timeline, yes, this is always important. So as I said before, the first CVs will be required for on October 1st, 2022 in the project funding scheme. This is followed by the funding instruments FLAIR, Synergia, and Ambizione. So in 2022, these are the 4 funding instruments which will require the new CV format. All others, they still use the current format or the funding instrument specific format, like for example, postdoc mobility in August or September, or the transitional measures, they will not use yet the new CV format. And then for 2023, you already have here an outline of certain funding instruments, but here we would suggest to check regularly our website where we have a really more updated list, because this can maybe change in the future a little bit. Yes, I think now we can go over to the 5 basic elements that are part of the new CV and really look into detail what is required there from the applicants. And so let's start with the education and employment history. This is actually a pretty straightforward element, but our research council members deemed it as obviously as an essential part of the CV and for the scientific evaluation. And furthermore, this is also an element which is important to the SNSF office as well, in order, for example, to assess eligibility questions for certain funding instruments. What's important here is that you list the relevant education and degrees you obtained, and that you indicate your relevant past and current employments. And the minimum information here is that you specify obviously your degrees, but also the field. Did you get a PhD in economics? Where did you work? In which institution? And for which durations? Really there, you can see afterwards, when we look at in detail at the portal, you immediately find out which is the minimum information there to provide. Yes, so to the second element, which is a little bit more complex, but I try to break it down to you on 3 slides, is the net academic age. And the rationale of this net academic age was to implement an option to account for time spent outside academia and to offer a wide range of deductions in order to, be able to match different career paths and different career trajectories. And at the SNSF, in the beginning and in the Research Council, it was argued that the academic age might not be useful for all applicants or for all funding schemes, but it was also discussed that there is still often a necessity for relating projects to the applicants, especially for projects where the applicant's experience becomes more important. And so, in the absence of an academic age, the SNSF recognized the risk of evaluators making their own estimations, which is a normal thing to do, or to rely on the biological age, which is also obviously not good practice either. So in the end, we decided, okay, let's try to implement a system which will help to put the research achievements into context. And so that's exactly the goal of this academic age, to help evaluators put the achievements in context with the project they propose and with their research experience. And so obviously the idea is to help to make a comparative evaluation fairer. And, two people might have very similar career paths and occupy a similar position at nowadays, but due to personal circumstances, they have spent very different amount of times in the academic environment. What's good to know is that the deductions are not visible to evaluators, so they only see one value. They do not see how it was calculated. This is because it might be sensitive data and should not be shared with work colleagues around the world. Information about illness or children should not be part of the scientific evaluation. And since the academic age is used in the evaluation, it still needs to be plausible. So the administrative office will check these values and these calculations. So therefore, it's important that you give a short description of deduction, and you will see later on the portal how that is possible in a very quick way. And another good point is, don't overthink it. I mean, while it is an element in the evaluation, we do not encourage to go down the rabbit hole and come up with calculations in the minutest details. It's always reflect on your personal situation and what is maybe the standard in your discipline and environment. This is, after all, let's say, personal or information that relies to a personal context. We can only give a certain general frame, right? Now, having said that, obviously, there is still a formula on how to calculate the net academic age, and which, by the way, happens semi-automatically on the portal. So first, we defined a start point and an end point. And as a start point, we take the PhD defense date or equivalent qualification or the state examination for clinicians. And as an end point, we have the submission deadline of the respective call. And so the time spent between these 2 points is the gross academic age and reflects the time which you could have spent in academia. And from this time, you can actually make deductions and calculate your net academic age to reflect more adequately on your CV your actual time that is spent in academia and your research experience. So obviously, some researchers have no deductions, and therefore the gross academic age is equal to the net academic age, or others do not seem it necessary to calculate their academic age. For example, a researcher who is close to retirement age, who has a gross academic age of, let's say, 34 years and took once a sabbatical for 10 months, it does not make a lot of sense there to spend much time to calculate it. But for others, it might be a very useful tool, actually, to use. Yes, deductions. As you can see here, there is a wide range of possible deductions, and this is intended to account for all different types of researchers or career stages, and different also research fields, that submit applications to us. And I won't go into too much detail here, but an important point here is the amount of time that can be deducted. And so for all categories, except maternity, you can deduct the actual time. So if you have been ill or unemployed for 8 months, you can deduct 8 months. Mothers, on the other hand, have the opportunity or the option to deduct up to 18 months per child or longer if justified. And so for each child, they can decide if they deduct, for example, the duration of the maternity leave of, let's say, 6 months, or if they deduct 10 months, or if they would like to deduct this lump sum of 18 months. And the idea behind this is to be able to account for other periods during which the capacity for research work was restricted, such as during pregnancy and breastfeeding. And there we really relied also on the guidance of our Gender Equality Office and the Gender Equality Commission, who looked also at other funders like the ERC, who have similar ways to calculate or to account for maternity as well. And yes, so mothers can decide and reflect on their personal situation and adjust, make the deductions that they think is fitting their situation. Right. Just quickly to illustrate shortly how such an academic age calculation could look like, we have here 2 examples of researchers who are preparing their applications for October 2022. So the end date is obviously identical. And the start date for the first researcher is September 2012 with the PhD defense. And this gives a gross academic age of 10 years, 2 months. The second researcher, she obtained her medical license in October 2017, resulting in a gross academic age of 5 years and 1 month. Now, researcher 1 deducts time for different reasons, deducts 18 months for maternity, 10 months because she was working part-time for a certain time period, and then she deducts 2 months where she was getting an additional degree. So therefore, she gets to a net academic age of 7 years, 8 months, whereas the second researcher had care duties, taking care of a family member during 2 years, and therefore deducts also a certain amount of time, then had extended clinical activities going on, deducted 2.5 years there, which results in a net academic age of 2 years, 6 months. So I hope with this you have a better insight into what is expected from the net academic age. And this is going to raise certain questions also because there are a lot of gray zones here. But again, just use a common sense approach and think of your personal situation when you calculate this. Right. Major achievements and selected works, the core element, as I call it at the beginning. So what's important to note is that your achievements can be from your entire career, and they do not need to be linked or of direct relevance to the research that you propose in your application. So the idea is to generate a generic CV that you can reuse afterwards at the SNSF for any other funding instruments, and which should serve as a general description of your most important achievements. And the descriptions of the achievements can include different examples or different things. It can be your specific role or contribution to the achievement. It can be your work or findings and their impact on science or society, or the historical context that framed the scientific problem. And as I said before, all these claims that you make in this narrative section, they need to be substantiated with supporting evidence. This can be an article, a book chapter, a data set, a conference that you organized, and so forth. And here again, this is also limited to 10 items. So you need to think, okay, what are my most important works, and then show us these achievements. And the narratives, together with these cited works, they are intended to allow evaluators to specifically assess the scientific qualifications of the applicant. And it's clear that numbers and types of achievements and works, they can vary between career stages and disciplines. And therefore, they're always evaluated by taking into account the scientific discipline, net academic age, and the career trajectory of the applicant. This is also why this academic age has this kind of connection as well. And the CV needs to be looked at as one unit within the CV, but also together with the research plan. Now, the question we always get is, or that we get already now and that we'll get in the future even more, is what information should I provide and what is an achievement? What should I write into this section? And these are obviously all valid questions. On one hand, the answer is in a way, in the sense, currently what we specifically ask from many different elements. So we ask for prizes and grants and so forth. And the first problem that it creates is that we basically get lists. People tell us, I got invited to 3 conferences, Symposium A, Meeting B, and so forth, or I have won 4 prizes. And in addition, context is also often missing. So for which achievement did he or she get the prize? Why was she invited? Which achievement got her invited into this symposium? Or what did the prize enable the researcher to do afterwards? So this is always very limited and missing, and is really not allowing to focus on the quality of these achievements. Or the information is very quantitative. It's like, I got 2.4 million in grants in the last 5 years. And we all know that this is very dependent on the discipline. And in addition, we don't know the role and of the applicant in this grant acquiring procedure. And then obviously we have just lists of articles and publications, which are obviously achievements and which are important. But again, when evaluating 60 publications, it is difficult to focus on the content of said publications. And secondly, with this information or certain information, it can be biased in that prizes are more often awarded to men, or that invited lectures are often dependent on the specific networks of a certain scientist. And so really focusing on such achievements without additional context can reinforce existing inequalities or issues. Therefore, what we are proposing with our system, with our narratives combined with works, is we would like to pursue another approach. We would like everybody who applies at the SNSF, even if it's career funding or for a transitional measure, very experienced researchers, everybody has conducted work and research, and will be able to point out, or will be able to select their major achievements and explain why they were important to their field, to the public, to their lab, to their institution. And the relevant elements in the description of your academic achievements depends on the particular field and on your personal situation. That is okay. But just show us and the evaluators what was your individual contribution to the research output, how does this output or show your abilities or qualities as a researchers. So obviously all these elements here, they can be obviously considered as an achievement, and they can be mentioned. It's just explain why or what achievement got invited to Symposium B. Obviously it's great to be invited, right? But explain why. Why were you so successful in mentoring those students? What did the grant allow you to do? Did it allow you to define a new theory, create a platform or a network for a rare disease? Or what was the contribution of Kim in this software that was developed? Was she really using a new way of coding and so forth? And therefore, we think the new format, even though reduced in scope, it will give enough flexibility for everyone. It's a short version, but it does not put young researchers, which might not have so many achievements yet, under pressure. They can explain in a couple words their achievements, and we will look at that, or the evaluators look at that in more detail. Obviously, it's important that our CV is accompanied with information to our evaluation panels. I mean, all this that I explained now, we also need to explain it to our panel members. And we are working on that. We have training sessions, we will provide guidance documents and so forth. This is obviously very important that they also know what's the goal of the CV, obviously. And another thing that is also important to mention is that also on an international level, there is a shift towards narrative to CVs with focus on narrative elements. So they will see more and more often CVs similar like this with similar goals. Right. But yeah, training obviously needs to happen on both sides, on the side of the applicants as well as the side of the evaluators. The last element is the ORC-ID. In order to create your CV, you will need such an identification number. This identifier associates you clearly with your research, irrespective of name changes and so forth. And the growing number of funders introduced these ORCID mandates. And also in Switzerland, we have now this Swiss ORCID consortium with Uni Bern, University of Zurich, ETHZ, which want to foster the uptake of ORCID. And so the SNSF is kind of following their initiative as well and implementing ORC-ID as part of your CV in the future. Please be aware, as I mentioned already in the beginning, that the publicly accessible content of your ORC-ID profile is also accessible to the reviewers and the evaluation panel. And if they feel not yet comfortable to judge the achievements and the competencies of the applicants on the basis of the narratives, the selected works, and the science part of the application, then they can consult ORC-ID and look at additional works to see more information. And so therefore, we would advise you to list your most recent or most important works as well in the profile. And yeah, I hope I was able to give you a better insight into the 5 CV elements. And with that, I hand over to Claudia for the live presentation of the portal.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Maybe you can switch over to the next slide. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm now going to show you what the CV actually looks like in the SNSF portal. Here on the slide, you can see the URL where it is available. We will go directly into the system in a minute. And maybe just as a preparation for when you plan to fill in your CV, you can make sure that you've got the 3 elements that are mentioned here. You will have to use your Switch Edu ID to log into the portal. many researchers at higher education institutions already have introduced the Switch Edu ID. So this was also the reason why the SNSF chose to use it, because it's pretty widespread. If you don't have a Switch Edu ID yet, it's not a problem. You can get one in a couple of minutes. You will also need a MySNF account still, because many of the important processes for the proposal and evaluation, they still are run on the MySNF system. And it's important that these two systems are linked and that we know who you are in MySNF. And as Martin just explained, the ORCID ID is also compulsory for setting up your CV. Maybe why do we do this like this, or why did we do a new online platform for the CV? This is kind of just the starting point for more content that will be provided on the SNSF portal in the course of the next months to come. So in the future, it will not only be the CV that you can fill in on the portal, but step by step, it will also be possible to hand in your proposal in the portal, and also the evaluation process will be done on the portal. The login is basically more or less self-explanatory, but because you also have to have that MySNF account, there may be some steps where you're not totally sure what you have to do, and for that there is a step-by-step guide we provided on the SNSF website where everything around the CV is explained. Okay, so I will now take over the screen and give you an insight on the system. Right. So it's most likely that you will start off when you start filling in your next proposal. You will go to MySNF. It's probably a system you know already. You will open up a new proposal, and already in the beginning, and especially in the container CV and major achievements, you will be pointed at the fact that the SNSF has introduced a new CV format, and that this should be done under this URL on this platform. So this is one way to reach the portal. The other way, of course, is just by directly typing in this URL, and then you will come to the portal, which looks like that. Right, so this is the starting page. You will have to log in. Right, I'm just going to do this right now. This is the Switch Edu ID. And now my Switch Edu ID, and with that, I'm accessing the portal. Right. So it's structured in a way, it's got a wizard, a so-called wizard on the left-hand side. You can click on the various categories, and that makes you jump all over the CV. So you can also go and have a look at the later chapters that will come. And you will start with the basic data where you type in your name, of course. I'm just going to change this to Jane Test because it doesn't really make sense in the academic age if I put in maternity and the person is called Tom Test. So it's called Jane Test. Right, so in the basic data section, I think the most important part is that here you're asked to connect your ORCID ID. This is a one-time connection you have to do. So you click here. It switches you over to the ORCID ID page, right? So I'm gonna type in my ORCID ID like this, and then password, I sign in. Right, so this is really a one-time thing. And as soon as you see this link here, it means that the portal has been connected with your ORCID ID, and that now you can directly access your ORCID ID from this link from the portal. Right, so much for the basic data. Then Martin has already explained quite a lot about the academic age. We had an example where the person had done her PhD in September 2012, and she's applying for a call that has a deadline in October 2022. So there's a gross academic age of these 10 years and 2 months. Of course, it could be different dates. And then in the deduction section, it's possible to actually put in reasons why this academic age should be smaller, less long than the whole time period of the gross academic age. So in the example we had, we were talking about maternity. And it means that during maternity, the person was not working to 100%. So the reduction was really 100%. And the duration was 18 months. So you can type this in. If necessary, you can also give a description. I think with maternity is probably not really necessary, but if it's maybe something different, it would also help for the plausibility check to give maybe some explanation for the deduction. You can save this. Then you've got already one reason. And you can put in a second one. For example, as we had in the example of Jane Test, you can put part-time work. The person, right? How much was it? I'm not quite sure. If she maybe had a reduction of 50%, and she did this during 10 months, and she could also save this, and so forth. So all these reasons you give up here in the deduction section will be put together in the summary, and it will be taken away from the gross academic age and result in a net academic age of a certain amount of time. Right. Now, I'm going to switch over to the education and qualifications. I tend to say this is like a little bit the LinkedIn part of the CV. It really works in a very similar way as education, qualifications, and jobs. You can indicate in your LinkedIn profile. You can add here an education you made. It is structured in a way that you can make a choice between a Swiss institution or a foreign institution, and you will find a hopefully comprehensive list of institutions of academia that are already registered in the system and that you can find. For example, here, whatever, maybe it was at EPFL, you start typing in and you can find your institution. Or you can also switch over and go to foreign institution, where you maybe want to say, well, I don't know, maybe I was in Stockholm. Yes, I was at Stockholm University. You can choose this and it automatically puts the country where it was. And then you have other information. You can give more details, like it's not enough to only say it was this university, but you want to make specific information about a department, the faculty, or the unit or section where you were. And you can also, of course, indicate what type of degree you were achieving during that specific moment of education. Right. Maybe as one specific thing for people who apply for career funding, there is this specific section where you're asked to indicate your supervisor. This is used for conflict of interest checks because it's important because of course the supervisor is considered to have a very important closeness to the applicant and will not be asked for a review, for example, of the specific proposal. Right. So you can have your whole list of your education, probably starting with a bachelor, a master, a PhD, maybe also a postdoc position you had. The system is more or less the same for the employments. And here, maybe there's one specific thing. If you you've been active outside academia, it's quite likely that you will not find the institution here in the two sections, Swiss institutions or foreign institutions, because these are institutions of academia. In this case, you will just click, I cannot find my institution, and then type in, for example, whatever, maybe it was Novartis or it was whatever company where you maybe had an employment of a certain period of time. Yes, so this is more or less everything I wanted to say about these two sections, education and qualifications. So we can then maybe move over to the major achievements. So this is really the part where you're asked to describe what piece of research, what area, what specific achievement really is special for your career. And you're given the possibility to describe up to 3 achievements in this section. And you've also got a maximum amount of characters you can use for that, and also a maximum amount of works you can cite or you can use as a reference underlying your achievement you've just described. So you can start off with one achievement, you put in text, and the counter reacts directly to the text you introduce in that section, and it will warn you when you have used up all the characters that are foreseen. You're basically free to add a second achievement, also a third achievement. Maybe if you're a younger person in academia, maybe you will choose to describe only one achievement, but with more background, more in detail. So the idea is really that you have a choice to say I want to go for one achievement that was really important, and I don't want to describe other things that I maybe didn't really have the chance to work so much on. But you're also free to say no. I'm going for 2 or 3 achievements, and I'm going to underlie them with works I have. Right, and then one of the reasons why you're asked to have an ORCID ID is that with this button here, it is possible for you to directly access the works, the publications you have collected in your ORCID ID or that are present there. So you can click here. It directly connects you to all the works you have in your ORCID ID account. And you can actually go there and search the works and say, oh, I think I had something, and I'm gonna go and search for that work and add it to my achievement. So I'm just gonna see. All right, maybe I have nothing. I know that once I published a newspaper article on this topic, so I click in the search field. I can start typing in the title of that article. I find it and I can add it to my achievements, and it will automatically be added here in the list of the works I have chosen to make reference to in my achievements. I can also move around. If I say, oh no, I actually wanted to cite this work earlier, or this one maybe later, I can move them around, and the numbering will automatically change. And then in the text, you can say, well, this part is now actually has to do with reference 1, and the second part has to do with reference 2, and so forth. It's also possible to, if you don't have, or if you want to cite a work that maybe you have not integrated in your ORCID, you can also add a work manually. Then you would click on this button and it opens up a new form where there is a whole choice of works you can choose and say, well, this is what I want to add. Like, for example, if you have, let's say you have a patent, and then I have to go and copy it. Sorry, oops. Excuse me, I just lost the bit I wanted to copy to show you this. Right. I want to add this. You would say, okay, this is the information about my patent I want to make reference to. You're also asked to provide a persistent identifier. There's also an explanation what we mean by persistent identifier. This is probably well known, but there is some additional information put in the info button. In this case, you maybe don't have one, so you can also choose to say no, I don't have a persistent identifier, and you also don't have an open access version of that patent. Okay, but you have the full citation, and then you can save this, and again, it is added to your list of works you want to make reference to. The idea is also that, as shown before, you're really pretty free what kind of works you can cite. So it's really not just restricted to to journal articles or books or book chapters. But for example, you could also say, oh, I actually developed a software. I'll just have to go and see. Yeah, it's here, right? And then I'm again going to copy the right thing. This is the relevant information about the software. Maybe you have it somewhere available in your documents. There's also a persistent identifier for the software. Okay, so there's a DOI. You can go and copy that, put it here manually, right? And then you can save it again, and you have in your list, you have your work you wanted to make reference to. So this is basically, of course, it's easier if you go and search for the works you have already included in your ORCID ID. But maybe if it's something very new, maybe it's a preprint or it's whatever other contribution you have not yet added to your ORCID ID, you can always choose the add work manually section and add it to your citations. Right. So now I'll probably have to delete these other achievements because they are still empty, but the same, of course, goes for these other achievements. All in all, you have up to 10 works you can make reference to, and you can distribute them freely over the 1 to 3 achievements you decide to write. Okay, so once all the categories in the wizard are on green, of course, that means that you have provided all the information that is necessary. And then you can click on the download button, which for the moment, it's still necessary to download a CV. It will generate a PDF. I'm just going to show that in a minute. And the PDF will then be uploaded in my SNF, where you're actually filling in your proposal for the next call. So you can click on download. It warns you that you should not change the file name. This has also to do with data processing between my SNF and the SNF-portal. So this is just an info. You can confirm and then download the CV. And this will generate a PDF that looks the way that Martin already showed in his presentation. So you've got the name of the person, you've got the academic age, it's the net academic age. So as he said, for the evaluation, the reasons for your deductions will not be shown. It's got the education section, the employment section, and the major achievements with the works cited as we have just seen on the system. And here over the ORCID ID link, the evaluators would also eventually have access to your ORCID ID profile. Okay, so once you have this PDF, you would go back to my SNF, and here as before, you also uploaded your CV. It just had whatever format, and as of October 2022, it will always have the format we just showed you. So here you can just add the file and upload the PDF you just downloaded from the SNF portal. Yeah, I think that's everything for the moment for the portal. I think we said that we would cover more or less an hour for the demo and for the background information. And with that, I would hand back to Martin to probably open up the Q&A session.
Yes, just in a moment. Before we go to the Q&A, we would just give you some information where you can find additional resources. So you have the link to the platform that Claudia just showed you, and there, if you have technical issues or whatever questions to the platform, you can always contact our support team there. We have a SNF website online, which also shows the basic concept of the CV. You can also contact us under evaluation@snf.ch. Then we're thinking about additional webinars later this year, more closely to the submission deadlines for project funding, Ambizione, and so forth. You can also read up on our news. And if you want more details about the pilot project and the results, the survey that we did with the researchers, you can always consult the preprint